We are working on lesson 10-6 today in our EnVision math workbooks. This is page 453 all the way to page 456 in your workbooks. But hold on, don't do those workbook pages yet. First, we're going to do our lesson, and then you're going to be able to apply what we've learned in your workbook pages. Today's goal is I can use different addition strategies to add and explain why my strategy works. So we're going to be using the open number line, compensation, break apart, place value chart, partial sums. We'll use vertical way. We're going to use lots of different strategies and practice explaining why they work. We're also going to explain exactly what we did, such as first I did this, then I did that, in order to add that element of the explain. So we're going to solve the same equation two different ways. So 256 plus 119. I'm just going to write it 2 times. Because we're going to solve it in 2 different ways. This first way that I'm going to solve, I'm going to use compensation. And when you're using compensation in addition equations, you add something to one of the addends, and then you subtract something, the same number, from the other addend. So for example, 256 and 119. I'm looking over at the ones place. The 9 is really close to the next 10, which would be 120. So I'm going to look at this number because that only has to add 1 to get to the next 10. And this one needs to add 4 to get to the next 10. So I'm not going to be adding 4 to the 6. Even though you could, I'm going to choose the easy button of, let me just add 1. So for compensation, I'm going to add 1 on this side, and because it's an addition compensation equation, I'm going to subtract 1 from the opposite side. 119 plus 1 more is 120. 256 minus 1 is 255. I'm bringing down my addition sign, and this is going to be a much easier equation to solve. I don't have to do the regrouping that I would need to do if I chose to do vertical way. I won't have to do some jumping. I like using computation because it's pretty easy to think about. So let's go ahead and solve this. 5 ones plus 0 ones is 5 ones. 5 tens plus 2 tens is 7 tens. And 2 hundreds plus 100 equals 3 hundreds. So the sum of 256 plus 119 is 375. And that's using compensation. First, if I was going to explain this, and that's kind of what we're going to be talking about, first I added 1 to 119 to get 120. Then I didn't add, I subtracted. Then I subtracted 1 from 256 to get 255. My new equation is 255 plus 120, and that has a sum of 375. So, I know that 256, and I know this looks like a lot of words, but you have to be able to explain. Part of using these different strategies, you have to understand why they work and why they make sense. So I know 256 plus 119 must equal 375. And if that didn't convince you enough, we are going to do another equation. For this one, I'm going to use the place value chart. And I'm just writing what I chose. so you remember the name that is associated with it, just in case you forgot or if you pushed pause and you were looking back at this video. For the place value chart, I have 3 digits, so I have to do the hundreds, the tens, and the ones on my place value chart. 256 has 2 hundreds, 5 tens, and 6 in my ones. 119 has 1 in the hundreds, 1 in the tens, and 9 in the ones. Because I've added them together, I'm going to look and see if there's any ability for bundling. I'm going to see if I can bundle up some of these. I'm not using the place value chart to show partial sums at this time. There is a way that you could do that, but that's not the choice that I made. I just only wanted to use the place value chart. So I'm going to do some bundling. I know y'all are really, really good at bundling, so I know this will be very simple for you. Watch. There's 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. I'm going to make a circle around here. I'm connecting my circle to my arrow to show that I bundled to make a new 10, and I'm just putting it in my tens column. I'm going to count how many are left. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in my ones place. I've got 5 tens, 6, 7 tens here, and 1, 2, 3 in my hundreds. If I put the number 3 in the hundreds plus 7 in the tens and 5 in the ones, that is the number 375. These are 2 different ways to solve the same equation. This person chose to use compensation. This person chose to use the place value chart. For today's lessons, you're going to be able to solve using any way that you choose. The part that you have to be able to do is explain. And you're not going to choose the same strategy for every single problem. I want you to be able to explain using lots of different types of strategies. So it's really good to have those words. So if I am explaining, first I put each number on the place value chart. Next, I bundled a 10 I have 3 hundreds, where am I getting this number 2 from? I have 3 hundreds, 7 tens, comma, and 5 ones. The sum of 256 plus 119 is equal to 375. So here's 2 ways to explain. This is the same equation using compensation, the same equation using the place value chart. We're going to do another equation with 2 different strategies just so you have a review. That green is a little tricky to erase. I'm not going to choose green on the next one. All right, I guess that's the best we're doing. All right, so for the next equation, we're going to split it in half again because I'm going to show you 2 ways to solve the same equation. We'll do 356 plus 128 equals something. So 356 plus 128 equals something. I am going to have you push pause. I want you to choose which strategy that you would like, and then I'm going to show you the strategies that I chose to solve this same equation. So push pause, solve this equation. Let's figure out if we get the same sum, even though we might choose a different strategy. Okay, so we are back. I'm going to reveal how I'm solving these. I I didn't want to use the green, so I'm going to choose blue right now. That green is not wanting to erase. The first way is vertical way, vertical, vertical. I'm almost thinking that that is not the right way to spell vertical way. Vertical, how else would I spell it? I don't really know. If it's wrong, I apologize, but that's the best try that I've got. Vertical way. So for vertical way, I'm going to place these numbers lined up. So that means I'm going to line up all of my hundreds, I'm going to line up all of my tens, and I'm going to line up all of my ones. This is the default for a lot of kids in class. Using vertical way is a traditional way. It's kind of old school. It's the way that your parents probably learned how to solve a lot of these math problems, and this is the default that they likely have when trying to help you with some work. I do not want you to use vertical way for every single problem today. You can choose it for maybe one of the problems, but please use some of the new strategies that you've learned. So, I'm going to start with my ones place. 6 ones plus 8 ones is 14 ones. I'm carrying my 1 on top. 1 10 plus 5 tens is 6 tens. If I add 2 more, that's 8 tens. 3 hundreds plus 100 is 4 hundreds. So the sum is 484. And all I have to do for my explain is first I added my ones. 6 plus 8 equals 14. I carried the 10. Next, I added my tens, and essentially you could just say that you added your tens, 5 tens plus 1 10 plus 2 tens equals 8 tens. Last, I added my hundreds. Three hundreds. It does have that S at the end. 300s plus 100 is 400s. I'm running out of space. I kind of wrote big up here, but you catch my drift. My last sentence would just say the sum is 484, and I doubt that you can see that from there. Sorry about that, but the words are what's important. The explaining with words and just justifying how you got your answer. Over here for the other side, I'm going to choose partial sums. This is something that was pretty new to us this week. We had a little bit of background knowledge on it, but it is something that I want you to have in your toolbox to keep remembering. So partial sums. When you're doing partial sums, you're going to line your equation up just like you do in vertical way. So 356, and I'm not going to take up as much space as I did last time. I learned my lesson. Plus 128. But instead of starting with my ones, I'm paying attention to the values of these digits that are the first one in line. I'm starting with my greatest value, and then I'm going to my least value. And I'm finding these numbers in the middle, which are called the partial sums. So for partial sums, I'm going to add 300s plus 100, which would be 400s. 5 tens plus 2 tens is 70. And then 6 plus 8 in the ones place will be 14. So now if someone was to say, hey, what are the partial sums for this? You would say 470 and then plus that 14. So these are what you would call the partial sums of that equation. Now I'm going to not pay attention to this top portion. I'm only looking at this equation here to solve using the partial sums. So I'm saying 0 plus 0 is 0. Add 4 to my ones, it's 4. 0 tens plus 7 tens is 7 tens. Add one more, it's 8 tens. And then I'm bringing that 4 from the hundreds all the way down. So I have 484 is the sum of 356 plus 128. 484. And I did not write it over here. I'll write it in now. I did get the same answer on both of those. That's definitely what you wanted to have done. Especially if it was like you and a friend and you were both working on the same equation. If you got different answers, you try to have to figure out, like, where did I make my mistake? Can I look back and figure out where there might be an error that I made? Silly mistakes happen, so it is really important to look back at your work. If I was explaining this, you could even just say, first, I added my hundreds. Next, I added my tens. Then I added my ones. And then I'm going to go ahead and say my partial sums are, and then I'm going to write them out. 400 plus 70 plus 14, which equals to 484. So I know 356 plus 128 equals 484. And this is using the way called partial sums, which is one of your strategies. This is using vertical way, which is another one of your strategies. So far we've gone over 4 different strategies. We're going to do a couple more. I definitely just want you to get in that practice habit of having more than one way that you could look at the same equation. You might find that one of these strategies you're most comfortable with, but I'll tell you, even as a teacher, teaching lots of different strategies to my students, I look at math problems a lot differently sometimes. Sometimes I think about problems in the break apart way where I can just look at it and say, oh, well, let me take that number and put it over here and let me make this look like an easier equation. Learning these strategies helps you be a better mathematician, and not just with written work, but a lot of times you can do some mental math just by having these strategies memorized. So it's super helpful. I'm not trying to make you have more work. I am just trying to make you much smarter in mathematics. The next one we're going to be using the open number line for. So I'm going to give myself some more space. So this equation, let's do 358 plus 200, I don't know, 32. How about that? All right, so on my open number line, I am starting with 358. I could start with 232. It's kind of up to you which one you wanted to start with. I just want to start with the first one. To me, that's easier and it doesn't cause as much confusion. So I'm going to start with the 358. I'm going to mark it over here. Because I'm really good at doing open number lines, like you should be as well, I'm going to add 200 immediately. You are getting really good at this, and so you should be able to add that 200 immediately as well. So here we are, 358. I'm adding 200. Next, I'm going to add the 30, and then I'll add the 2. So 358 plus 200 is 558. Now I'm going to add the 30. Now, these don't really, this is not to scale. It doesn't really matter how big you're doing that. I just know when I get to the 2, I need to leave myself enough space. So 558 plus 30 is 588. Now I'm going to add 2 in my ones place. 588 plus 2, ooh, I have a regrouping. So this is 590. I'm going to look back at my equation. Did I start with 358? I did. Did I add 232? Well, 200 plus 30 plus 2 is 232, so I did that. The sum should be 590. If I was going to have to explain that, which you must do today, first, I added 200 to 358. I might even, you know what, let's just say, first I added 358 plus 200 equals 558. Next, I added 558 plus 30 equals, and I already have all of my work here, so I'm just kind of following along these little jumps. 588. Last, I added 588 plus 2 equals 590. So I know 358 plus 232 equals 590. And that is how I would explain how I got my answer. This is my evidence on how this works. That's how come that strategy is working. And this is the open number line. Next, we're going to be doing break apart. When we're working on break apart, I'm going to have you work on this, and then I'm going to pause it, and then you're going to come back, and I want to see if you can remember how to do this break apart. Okay, so remember break apart. You're going to be breaking apart and taking some of this off to make this equation easier to solve. So let's see how that goes. Push pause and then come right back. All right, so for break apart, what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to break this into smaller chunks so that it's easier for me to solve. When you break apart, you could break it into the hundreds, you could break it into the tens, you could break apart those ones. I'm going to just write up here, break apart, because that's the strategy that I want to use. When you're breaking it apart, you also are writing some new equations down below. So this is just, sometimes you might even get to the spot where you can think this in your head and you can solve some of these equations mentally. All right, so 454 plus 258. I'm going to take some of these numbers from one another to make it a little bit simpler for me. I'm going to borrow 6 from over here. That's going to leave me with, let's see, if I subtracted 6 from here, that would leave me with 252. I'm going to turn this into 460 plus 252 equals something. I might change my mind about that because now that I'm thinking about it, I think I want to add the hundreds separately. So I can't really go back, so I'm just going to do an erase, and I'm going to add it a little differently for break apart. Oh, goodness gracious. All right, so 454 plus 258 equals something. I'm going to add those hundreds. So I'm going to just say 454 plus 200 equals, that's easy. I'm just increasing this hundreds by 2. So 654. I have 5 and an 8 that's left. I have 58. So I just broke off this 200 and I left my 58. So I still need to add the 58 to this. So 654 plus 58, that's a little bit hard to do. I'm going to break off some of those numbers. This 54 needs some more in order to get to the next 10. So first, I'm going to get this into, let's see, I'm going to just put my 58 here. So I'm going to break off some of this. I'm going to, let's see. Sorry. I am breaking off 6 because I really want this to be a whole number and not have any of these ones. I want that to get to the next 10. So this is going to leave me just with that 52. This was something that I tried before, but those hundreds, I want those to kind of get out of the way as well. So 654 plus the 6 would be 660 plus the 52. That's my new equation. 2 in the ones plus, 0 plus 2 is 2. 6 tens plus 5 tens is 11 tens. So I have to carry a 1 up here. So this sum should be 712. So 454 plus 258 equals 712. When I'm doing this and I'm trying to explain, what I would write is, first, I broke apart 258 and added 454 plus 200 equals 654. Next, I added, this is what I did next. 654 plus 6 equals 660. Last, I added 660 plus 52 equals 712. Now, this is a whole lot of work for one problem, and this is part of why I want you to be comfortable using lots of different strategies. This is not my number one choice for this problem. There's a much easier way to solve this, and when I wrote this problem and made it up, I kind of decided that I didn't want to use break apart for it, and that's my bad. I didn't really pick a great problem, but this is why it's important to have different strategies. When you tackle a problem, look at it. This would be so much easier to solve with compensation than with break apart. With compensation, I would just have to add 2, subtract 2, and then I'd have a really simple equation. I could line this up vertical way. That would be way easier for me. Maybe an open number line is easier for you on some of these equations. Maybe you just love doing place value charts because you like drawing circles. It's kind of up to you. For this lesson, 10-6, I would like you to use lots of different strategies. Try to choose a strategy that's going to make the most sense for the equation that you're working on. Please turn in those pages to me on the Google Drive, and I will be happy to help you if you have any problems. Check out my video for different strategies if you're having trouble trying to remember which strategies that we have talked about, which strategies that we've learned. Make sure that you are able to explain why the strategy works. Take care.